So Bill Wilson left in 1990 to go to the Tennessee Baptist Convention. And when he retired from that position in 96, it was at that point that Mike Glenn asked Bill and Creeley to come back to serve as Brentwood's first missions ministers. And they did that, and they did it very well and very faithfully for about 4 years. So at the end of 2001, Bill and Creeley were looking to permanently retire, so to speak. And so they were looking for a part-time missions minister. Now around that time, my wife and I were transitioning from Hong Kong, where we had been serving, to Nashville to go to school at Vanderbilt. And I wasn't thinking getting a job at a church. You know, this is the Bible Belt. I had never lived in the Bible Belt. Churches are a dime a dozen. Ministers are a dime a dozen. Who's going to hire me? But some friends of ours from California had relocated here and were members of Brentwood Baptist and had heard that we were moving, and they connected us with the missions committee. And we met with them, and within 2 weeks of moving here, I was hired part-time. And what an incredible blessing. We were still at the old church, so I'm glad that we had a few months at the old location, so I know what people are talking about when they say, you know, back when we were at 409. So it was an exciting time, but it was also a real culture shift for us. Again, had never lived in the South, had never worked in a Caucasian church before, had never heard of a missions minister position, so I really had to figure out what to do. Thankfully, Bill and Creeley were still around, and just what a blessing. They were cheerleaders, they were advocates. They not only gave me history and context, but they were true partners, not only in that immediate transition, but in the years afterwards. And so blessed that I had about 5 years with Bill before the Lord called him home. So Bill and Creeley did an amazing job setting a culture. When he was pastor, it was always a generous church, but when he came back as the missions minister, they really focused on mobilization. How do we get our people involved and engaged? So Creeley had already started the Middle Tennessee chapter of Christian Women's Job Corps. Bill and Creeley pioneered partnerships with a church in Ottawa, Canada that they had initiated. They started sending teams to Brazil, working with Ray and Sharon Fairchild in Rio. So a lot of the stuff that you see today, priorities for us, partnership, not trying to do everything ourselves, being responsive to needs, Bill and Creeley had sort of set that DNA. I remember when I started at the beginning of 2002, the mission offering the prior year, the goal was $75,000, and we didn't quite make it. And so I remember in 2002, we set the goal for $85,000. And I remember several people saying, well, why would we increase the goal when we didn't even make last year's goal? Well, that was the year we moved into this new building. And I remember many of us thought, look, if we cannot find $85,000 for missions when God has blessed us with this incredible building, you know, we got a problem. But you know, God's people came through. And every year we saw mission giving and mission involvement growing. When it comes to mission trips, we transitioned that title to Mission Journeys. But I think we had about 50 or 60 people in 2001 go on mission trips. And what we now call Mission Journeys, last year, 2018, we topped over 800. So we've grown from a few dozen going on mission trips to over 800. Missions giving from the tens of thousands into the millions of dollars. Missionary units. When we came, we had 2 or 3 missionary units serving around the world. We're just at 40 units, representing about 100 men, women, and children in over 25 countries. So it's been amazing that as Brentwood itself has grown in its footprint in Middle Tennessee and with campuses, our engagement with the world, both in a local context and in a global context, has grown significantly as well. A key catalyst in a lot of this was Hurricane Katrina, but not just Hurricane Katrina. If people remember that in a 1-year period, the tsunami in December of 2004 in Southeast Asia happened, and then about 9 months later, Katrina hit. So those two things together was sort of a galvanizing, catalyzing force. And I remember when Mike Glenn said, I wonder if this could be the year of $1 million mission offering, because Katrina was just such a focus for so many of us. We had so many evacuees in our area. We had so many hundreds of people that wanted to do things. And so that really was a jump start to a lot of things. And I think historically, we have seen Brentwood Baptist really respond to disasters. Not only the tsunami of 2004, Katrina in 2005, the Nashville flood in 2010, followed by the Haiti earthquake. That has always been an incredible opportunity for the church to rise up and be the church. I'd also say that part of that catalyzing effect of our response to Katrina helped us figure out that we need more help. And so the first person to come on staff, other than my wife and I, was Kim Cox. And in those early days, her influence and wisdom was so important in logistics and planning. And I'll never forget, in 2007, we took our largest mission team ever, 108 people, to Thailand. And with the precision of a military operation, we got everybody there in one piece, and everybody came back in one piece, and we got the job done. And so Kim was so important in those early years in helping us figure out we want to do big things and important things, and we want to do it in the right way. And so ever so grateful to her. So when I first arrived, at the time, there was already a unified mission offering. It wasn't called Hope for the World. I believe in 2001 it was called Carry the Light. And as the mission offering started to grow, we started thinking about what would be a good name for it. And I think it was around the 2004-2005 timeframe. It was Carla Worley who suggested that name. And for whatever reason, when we heard that and unpacked what it could mean, it just made sense. And it's been exciting to see not just the offering, but that particular name sort of really take hold and become a part of our culture. And I believe that in the last 10 or so years, well over $15 million has been given to mission causes, both here and around the world, under that Hope for the World banner. So it's been exciting to see it grow from something small to something sizable. As I recall, back in the 2000-2001 period, the unified mission offering was taken every November and December, was called Carry the Light. And then over the years, as it morphed and changed, it was actually Carla Worley taking a verse from the Gospel of Matthew about Jesus' name being the hope for all the world. We thought, what about Hope for the World being the name of the mission offering? And it just seemed to resonate and stick. And it's exciting to see not only how the offering itself has grown, but how that terminology has sort of stuck and communicates effectively what we're trying to do, because the world not only includes our neighbors, but it also includes the nations. And it not only includes the nations, but it includes our neighbors. So it really does encompass it all. And I estimate that in the last 10, 12 years, we've given far over $12 million, $15 million to missions through this offering vehicle. So in 2002, we were new here, and I had never been to Africa before, really hadn't given Africa a lot of attention, but during that time, the AIDS crisis was very much not only in the news, not only on the hearts and minds of people in the secular world, but the church was beginning to ask questions. What is our responsibility? What should we do? And through some friends, I heard about this church in Cape Town, South Africa, that was doing some radical and some brave things. And so I went down and met them and saw what they were doing, how they were organized, how they had a missional heart and heartbeat. And you know, when you meet inspiring people, my thought was, I want our people to be around these people. So this was a church of about 400 that had this God-sized vision. So I came back and started talking about Living Hope. And so in 2003 is when we sent our first team. And so in the last 15, 16 years, probably hundreds of our people have been on short-term mission journeys. We've sent probably over a dozen of our members to serve there long term, anywhere from 3 months to 10 plus years. And as an organization, Living Hope has continued to grow and thrive. And so, birthed out of a local church and Pastor John Thomas's heart and vision for the poor in their community, Living Hope employs over 200 people who are touching literally tens of thousands of lives. And I believe they've taught us a lot. They're thankful for what we've given them in terms of money and treasure and time, but they have taught us so much as well. And our partnership with Living Hope was instrumental in helping our pastor develop the vision of the Middle Tennessee Initiative. So it's a great example of what meaningful, long-term, generous, sustained partnership can look like. So our partnership with Living Hope and King of Kings Baptist Center, John Thomas, has taught us a lot. And so John Thomas was ill, and Mike Glenn just felt impressed, led by the Lord to go and visit John. And that trip helped articulate and refine for Mike our own Middle Tennessee Initiative. And what I like to say is that we want, through the Middle Tennessee Initiative, we want to make sure there are healthy congregations. So we don't want to just start ministries addressing issues of poverty, healthcare, and education. That's part of it. But we want churches in those communities doing that. And so whenever we can partner with a church that has a heart for that, it doesn't need to be Brentwood Baptist that's seen going into a community. We want to help a local church elevate its profile in that community. So our partnership with Living Hope helped Mike in significant ways. And that's part of the beautiful rhythm of missions, is that we learn as we go. And I think one of the great challenges and opportunities for any church is, what is it that we're doing overseas, and how can that inform how we be the church and do the church in our local community? And so the fact that Living Hope, one of our global partnerships, has informed us how we are to be in our own community, I think is really special. So King of Kings Baptist Center in Cape Town, South Africa, is a predominantly white African church. And they've always been creative. And even when apartheid was still in force, this was a church that planted a church in a black township when it was unheard of to do so. They also started Africa's first Christian radio station. So they'd always been very aware and sensitive of the needs around them. But when the AIDS crisis really hit, they said, we have got to do more. So this local church of 400 people started to do some radical things. They stopped a building program in order to assist the poor. They had goals of 40 to 50% of their income going to help the poor and needy, not only in their own community, but all around the world. They got mobilized, they got organized, and they started caring for the sick and the dying in their local community. They still had church, they still took care of the people that came through their doors, but they also placed a renewed emphasis on going out and reaching people for the gospel. And so we've learned a lot from them and how to do the same thing in Middle Tennessee. And so John Thomas, the pastor of King of Kings and now head of Living Hope, continues just to be a friend not only to Mike, but to so many of us. And we sort of use him as a model and example of how to be oriented towards the needs of others. And that's informed a lot of what we do. It was out of our relationship in Brazil that the mobile medical dental unit came into play. We saw the power of, in places like South Africa and Brazil, of medical missions twinned with the spoken evangelistic word of the gospel. And we thought, how can we bring that in our context in Middle Tennessee? And so now for 6 years, we've had a mobile medical dental unit that sees hundreds of patients a year, hundreds of gospel conversations, thousands of teeth pulled, and dozens coming to faith in Christ. Again, global engagement informing how we reach our own community. So I think it's convenient to look at missions across all of our campuses and congregations in 3 main buckets. Bucket 1, mobilization. How do we get our people activated, involved, and deployed based on how God has gifted them where are they called to serve? Not just inside the four walls of the church, but where are they called to serve outside the four walls of the church? So that's bucket one, mobilization. Then there's multiplication. We want to be about disciples making disciples who make disciples. We don't want to do just good things. We want to do good things, and as we do that, share the gospel and bring others along who will do the same. We talk about level 3 missions. Level 1, meet a need. Level 2, meet a need and tell someone about Jesus. Level 3, meet a need, tell someone about Jesus, and equip them to go do the same. And then the third bucket would be our deaf congregation, which has become just a nationally and internationally known place for deaf equipping and deaf sending. So as we look to the future, a mentor of mine talks about tithing the people to the nations. So we have about 100 men, women, and children currently serving in 20 countries. With 100 around the world, that still leaves 11,000 right here to reach Middle Tennessee. And we really do need every single one of those people reaching Middle Tennessee. But what would it look like if we didn't have just 100 reaching the nations, but 200, 300? So I would hope and pray that God would favor us to see an explosion of those going to the ends of the earth. I would love to see our members sharing their faith boldly and courageously and contextually in the places where they live, work, and play. It would be my hope that we would see Brentwood Baptist not as a place of only comfort and care and inspiration, which it is, but a place of equipping and a place of sending, because we have been invited into God's rescue mission to the world. So I pray and I trust that mobilization, multiplication are only going to grow as we enter the second half of our first century.